driving innovation through inclusion, and where culture, leadership, and decision-making connects. And my title will be Uncertain Times, Changing Principles. It's really changing. 2 months ago, who of you predicted something happens in Algeria? And 5 years ago, around this time, who of you really thought about Barack Obama will become a president? Right? And why that happens? It's maybe changing times. Now, let's see. Should I do it? Okay, how we do it? Okay. This, that. All right. You know what that means. Over the last 20 years or so, this has become one of the major issues in the world. And we try to address this thing, but it's very hard to do. You know what's happened 10 years ago? 9/11, then war in Iraq. Now also changing, many of you use iPad, iPhones, and iPad, I think you're using it, right? That's really changing your attitude of this accessing to information. And this come to the marketplace only 3 years ago. Do you remember that? Just 3 years. And Google, Twitter, all the wiki. So when you hide certain things, that's somebody picked this up. So trust, transparency. And remember this only 2 years ago, just a few months before Fukushima. I was in Tunis 1 week before this happened for some engagement, and that's what happens. So this is, all these things happened over the last 2 decades, and particularly 1 decade, very much faster and faster. This is 2 years ago, a massive earthquake and massive tsunami, once in 1,000 years in Japan, which triggered this Fukushima nuclear, and everybody just waiting for this nuclear renaissance with carbon capture, all the things. But only 2 years ago, but not much sort of happening in Japan to recovery thing, and also the how to contain this nuclear thing, and that is has to be a major focus. It's very important this happened in the number 3 economy in the world, and also a nation with a very much high respect and also a pride in this science and technology and engineering. That really had a major impact to the rest of the world, which led to Germany and Swiss and a few other countries, Swiss and Germany and Italy, to go out nuclear. That kind of impact they had. Now, these issues over the last 2 decades is really boils down to these 2 issues. One is increasing world population and connectivity. Now here, let's see, here, no, it doesn't show this. So like 2,000 years ago, world population of us, Homo sapiens, was 200 million, 2,000 years ago. Now it's doubled to about 500 million, about 15,000. That means the time of Da Vinci, Last Supper. And subsequent four centuries, up to 1900, this population tripled to 1.6 billion. That's only 100 years ago. But last 100 years, this 1.6 billion reaching 100 years later, 6.4 billion, and 10 years later now 7 billion. So massive human population explosion. That's one major issue, like food and water, climate change, energy, housing, all the things. But this is due to progress in science and technology, immunization, health, we live longer, all the things. Now, life expectancy at birth of 2,000 years ago in most civilized or at least advanced countries like Rome, Roman Empire, is about 20 to 25 years. 100 years ago, most advanced countries at that time, towards the turn of the 20th century in the US, UK, and Japan was a bit of this, was about 40 to 45. But over the last 100 years, we talk about 80, live longer, which is sort of completely unexpected of any social structure And so that we think we are very happy, but that's really a major issue, adapting this change, aging society. Only good news is in the lower panel on this column, vertical column, which shows a decade of population increase. So that is begin to decline from 1990, which is good because low fertility rate, and so that net increase of each population addition is decreasing, which is great. But that transition for coming this century would take a long time to begin this declining population. But once it starts declining, it becomes very fast. But that's what it is. Second is the hyper-connectivity of this population. All of a sudden, you use not only digital, but iPad, iPhone, touch panel. Baby are born with touch panel. Parents shows iPad. So when babies start walking, they touch on TV screen. But nothing happens. But it's going to happen very soon. So that's the technology. Technology always advances. It's not going back. So that's the reality of the world, okay? Now, so that let's say 20 years, last 20 years, let's review it. The 20 years ago, end of Cold War, preceded by Berlin Wall, fall of Berlin Wall in 1989. The same year, we are using laptop, but I think it was not really connected. If you're working 20 years ago, you are using laptop or computers, tabletop computer, but it's not really connected. You're using primarily Excel and word processor. But World Wide Web came in, begin to connect each other. But access was very difficult because you're using telephone line, slow, but all the technology always advanced very rapidly, and that's where we live now. Everybody has at least one laptop computer in your pocket, touch panel. That's amazing, almost just 20 years, and it's become mobile. And globalization, all the financial crisis ensues, and 1990 is Japanese financial crisis, which didn't have a major impact to the rest of the world, but 1992 was another financial crisis in Nordic countries, and 97 Asian financial crisis, and Rio de Janeiro, what that means. Rio de Janeiro, 1992, in the United Nations summoned a commission for sustainable development. Because sustainable development, we knew that before this end of Cold War, but I think Cold War make this sustainability is not of a top priority in the global political agenda, right? Because we knew that, but couldn't do it because both sides and the West and the East, like Russia and the US, has both more than 3,000 anti-ballistic missiles with nuclear warfare, so everything can trigger to the rest of the end of our civilization. That was 20 years ago, right? So that Rio de Janeiro, 1992, UN convened the Convention of Sustainable Development, made a report of transition to sustainable development. That's the issue for 21st century. And 10 years later in Johannesburg, Rio 10 was held, and that is also a remarkable thing because usually this kind of UN convention is the head of government and politicians, also civil service, and they come, and UN agency gather together, make certain policies. But in Rio 10, which in Johannesburg was remarkable, they invited the head representation of the science community, representation of women, and representation of youth, and recognizing the multi-stakeholders involvement of this kind of policy-making process. That's happening over the last just only 10 years. They recognize not only government, but multi-stakeholder have to be involved. So this is only 10 years ago. You think about NGO and this, Oxfam, all the things involved in the policy making, but that is a very recent event. All right, so that's the first 10 years after the end of the Cold War. And then what happened? Turn of the century, we are talking about in computer, year 2000, but nothing happens. And we welcome 21st century, right? You remember only 10 years ago. And we welcoming new century. Then what happened 9/11? Right? That's really changed the world sort of political arena and all the confrontation. And at the same time, technology always advances, and digital age, wireless, last 1 mile issue was resolved, and touch panel, and emerging economies, BRICS, and global financial crisis of Lehman, and all of a sudden, advanced country stopped growing. Even financial debts, aging, all the different issues, a common agenda for every advanced country. And Barack Obama, I told you about 5 years ago. Are you seriously betting on him? Why he won this election? One is obviously that time of after 9/11, his image and personal history. He's a great orator, and just he around him, many bright kids gathering force. But one factor was usually presidential campaign. They ask you 2,000 plate fundraising, 5,000 plate fundraising all over the country. So it's completely detaching from the average people. But he started using BlackBerry and asking you to donate $50, $100, and $20. So greater public sector feel like we are part of presidential election. You could engage, but once you donate, you're coming back all the time. Donate more, donate some. So that's connected world. But at that time, everybody has a mobile phone. But what was the company which has the largest share of this mobile phone at that time, 5 years ago, during Obama campaign? Company? Everybody's right. Name of company is Nokia. Nokia captured 40% of share of mobile phone 5 years ago, but now it's bankrupt, gone. That's the rapidity of the world affairs. And if you go back, this time, 1991, end of Cold War, World Wide Web, new business emerged from the Silicon Valley area. Now, some are very successful, some fail, but come back. And what are the companies who were built around that time? Yahoo, eBay, Amazon, all founded around 1993 and 1994. New business, new dynamic change in the world affairs. So that's what it is. So this is a 10 years you remember, because most of you are in the sort of similar kind of business right now. It's different from 20 years ago. But this is a decade, and then just the beginning of 2 years ago, Web3, that's my naming, so forget about it. But I think then Arab Spring, from December 17th in Tunisia, spread out quickly to Libya and Egypt. In fact, February 11th, President Mubarak was sort of left Egypt. He was exiled. And 1 month later, Fukushima accident and massive tsunami, March 11th. And this Arab Spring triggering many things in Yemen, and also Bahrain is small fights, but now in Syria. What's going to happen in that area? That may have a major impact for the rest of the world, because the world becomes so connected, interdependent, and interconnected. I think you cannot escape from certain things happening in completely distant area. So this is the two things. Advancing science and technology, hyper-connected world. So in the world, the global world we live in is completely different from 20 years ago. It's now interdependent and hyper-connected, but fragmented, because the gap and the difference in culture, different value, and different sort of societal value is confronting each other. Because as a human being, when you see somebody who never seen in color and texture and different culture, once you just encounter, usually you don't understand. Both has a good virtue, but somehow become very insecure. And in fact, Amartya Sen wrote a book in 2006, Identity and Violence. We have each identity of your race, ethnic group, and culture, and your job, and expertise, and gender, and whatever you do. So every one of you has a multiple identity when you are in company, when you're in a family, you're talking to your daughter or son, all different identity. But when this identity crash with the change in difference in culture, of value, ethnic group, and also religious reasons, and then this confrontation tend to create a lot of violence sometimes, particularly like encounter of this religious difference. And right now is Christian and Islam is sort of confrontational, and this is a sad thing to do, but always that happens. But eventually we're going to gather together and become understanding each other. That is the world we live in. And that is the reason we value the inclusion, heterogeneity, and diversity. That is the sort of energy avoiding this conflict, but rather than addressing the future issues of this global world. Now, these are the very crazy one, right? So crazy enough to quit Harvard after 2 years, Facebook, and Bill Gates. Steve Jobs never been to college, only 6 months, because he was so poor, so he couldn't finish even college. Even 6 months, that's enough. And Google, these two guys, created from 2 graduate students, and they were studying at Harvard, not Stanford, that's Harvard of West Coast or whatever. But I think they just thought maybe just create some company in 1997, and in Stanford lab, and then that's the rest of the history. That's only 1997. IPO 2006, and that's it. All right, so things are changing very rapidly. Now think what happened. This Facebook, maybe you may use Facebook, but this founder, crazy guy from Harvard, but he may be very wealthy. But how many jobs this Facebook creates in the world? How many jobs Twitter creates in the world? So that's one issue of this changing paradigm. Now, this is a GDP per capita of estimated value over 1,000 years. If you look at this value in, I just cannot see, but I think India, China, and the rest of so-called G8 countries like Italy, Japan, the US, UK, and 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, this is the same. And flat, but around turn of 16th century, Italy doubled it. Perhaps it was not Italy at that time, but Florence and Geneva and Venice, and they are sort of trading thing. And categorically, we say this is right now Italy, but may not have been Italy. Even United States didn't exist. But all of a sudden, this yellow line, because around that time, for example, Spain colonized Latin America, majority of Latin America, discovered some gold, and they just transferred all the gold into Spain, but everything belonged to the royal family. So it was not enough to increase GDP per capita of that Spain of today. So that kind of thing. But Industrial Revolution, which started in UK, really created the added value of whatever this commercial value, and also sailing, not wind, but with engine, and that's really expanding a lot of speed and also domain of this trade. And also with that kind of technology and this communication tool and the finance, all the things become completely different, much, much faster, and this world become much, much smaller from Europe. And that is really driving the British Empire and creating the sort of social fundamentals and structure and way of we live, and city, and railway, and transportation, and communication, your employment, and also corporate governance. All the manufacturing is the driving force of economic growth through these 200 years, but may not be anymore, because now any manufacturing with computer and website and even 3D printer, and it's not going to, it will go shifting to the low labor force place. You can have a similar quality of manufacturing product, and corporate become very sort of diverse global company and disseminate your entire manufacturing sector to financial sector to telephone call, and maybe no telephone call because you use more like web thing, Twitter, all the thing. So I think whatever your leadership, you are not creating job. And as a developing country, capturing more wealth and growth, and this their people are more educated, more opportunity to go to university and college, higher education, and skill set become much qualified, but can't get a job. And many universities, many US universities are really attracting place for many enthusiastic and motivated young people from that kind of country, and they got a great education, go back to their country, they might create any company, this or that global company, that's fine. But in manufacturing, it's very difficult to create a net growth of just job opportunity. So I think even you have a great higher degree of these degrees, it becomes very difficult. Unemployment of youth is a very huge problem in many European countries and Middle East and anywhere else, and they are connected and they can see such an injustice in the world. In the United States, annual income of top 1% capture 25% of the entire income, and if you translate this into global world, top 1% of wealth, at least income, for annual income of top 1% capture 99% of this value. And they see that on this easy access through mobile phone with touch panel and visual image, and 99% think it's not fair. That